Mira walked down the quiet road that led from the town square to her small family farm, and every step carried the weight of the words she had been hearing for weeks. People said her father had left her nothing, and they said it with the kind of confidence that made it sound like a fact written in the air. She tried to ignore them, yet the words settled on her shoulders whenever she passed by the bakery or the general store. She kept her head down and stayed polite, but she felt the comments pushing into her thoughts each time she tried to focus on something else. Her father had been a private man who spoke little about his plans, and he never tried to impress the town. He cared about the soil, the land, and the small details that others did not see. When he passed away, Mira had felt a quiet, heavy kind of sadness, but she also felt something unfinished, as if he had left behind a message she was meant to find. She told herself it was only her imagination, yet the feeling did not fade. The farm was peaceful when she reached it, but it felt different now that she lived there alone. The house was small with chipped paint and uneven steps, and the barn stood behind it with its wide wooden doors and slanted roof. Birds perched on the roof every morning, and the wind moved through the tall grass in soft waves that made the land look alive. Mira stopped near the gate to look at the barn, and she felt a strange pull toward it, the same pull she had been trying to ignore since the day of her father's passing. She had stayed away from it because she did not want to feel the emptiness inside. The barn reminded her of a time when she was small and her father lifted her to the top beam so she could pretend she was sitting on a throne. She remembered how their laughter sounded in the wide space and how the sun lit up the dust in golden streaks. Now the barn seemed too quiet, too still, too full of things she did not understand. Inside the house, she placed her bag on the old table and looked around at the simple furniture her father had kept. There was nothing fancy in the living room and nothing that looked valuable. She checked the cupboards and drawers even though she had already checked them before, hoping she had missed something small and meaningful that could prove he had planned something for her. She found only a few notebooks filled with worn pages, a couple of tools, and a handful of old keys that belonged to doors she already knew. People had said her father struggled with money, and sometimes she feared they were right. She wanted to believe there was something more, something hidden, something that showed he had thought of her future. Each time she found nothing, she tried to tell herself that memories were enough, but her heart did not accept that answer. She felt restless, as if the truth was close but still out of reach. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Mira stepped outside again and looked at the barn with a mixture of hesitation and curiosity. She walked toward it slowly, listening to the crunch of gravel under her shoes. She slid the wooden door open, and a warm beam of sunlight spilled across the floor. Dust floated gently in the air like tiny drifting seeds. The scent of old wood filled the space, and Mira breathed it in as memories stirred. She walked across the floor, and the barn creaked under her steps. The sound made her pause, but something else caught her attention. When she took another step, she heard a faint metallic echo beneath the boards. It was light and soft, but it did not sound like wood or nails or tools. It sounded out of place in the quiet barn. Mira knelt and placed her palm on the floor. The wood felt cool and smooth, worn by years of use. She pressed on a plank near the sound and felt it shift slightly. Her father had built the barn himself, and he used to say that every board had a purpose, so the idea of a loose plank felt strange. She leaned closer and found a thin gap between the plank and the one beside it. She pulled gently, and the plank lifted more easily than she expected. Beneath it lay a shallow space that did not belong to the original structure, and inside that space was a small notebook wrapped in a cloth faded by time. Mira lifted it carefully, feeling her heart beat faster than before. The notebook was old, and the edges of the pages were yellow. She opened it with steady hands, and her eyes widened when she saw her father's writing. It was unmistakable, neat and firm, the same way he wrote lists for farm tasks and notes for repairs. The first page held a short message addressed to her. He wrote that he knew she would find this when she was ready, and that there were things he had kept hidden not out of distrust, but out of hope that she would use them when the right moment came. He mentioned a promise he had made long before she was born, a promise to protect something important for her future. Mira felt a warm ache in her chest as she read, because the words sounded like him, calm and sure and thoughtful. She turned the page and found a small sketch of the barn floor with a mark near the corner. The drawing pointed to a place where another plank could be lifted. The note beneath the sketch said that once she opened the floor at the marked spot, she would understand. Mira felt the air shift around her, as if the barn were listening. She stood slowly and looked at the far corner. The place he had marked was near the wall where old tools hung on rusted hooks. The sunlight reached only part of that area, and the rest remained in soft shadow. She walked toward it with careful steps, feeling a mix of excitement and worry. What could her father have hidden under the barn floor? She wondered whether it was something valuable or something meaningful in a different way. She wondered if it would answer the questions that had been troubling her since the day she lost him. When she reached the corner, she knelt again and tapped lightly on the boards. She heard the same hollow sound as before, but deeper this time. She placed her fingers under the edge of the plank and pulled. The wood lifted slowly, revealing the dark space beneath. Mira leaned forward, and her breath caught when she saw a metal surface. It was the top of something rectangular, covered in a layer of dust and dirt. It looked old but strong. She brushed away the dust and felt smooth cold metal under her fingertips. A quiet shiver ran down her spine, not of fear but of realization. Her father had hidden something important here, something he wanted only her to find. In that moment, the whispers in town felt distant and untrue. As she stared at the metal shape beneath the floor, Mira understood one thing with absolute clarity. Her father had not left her nothing. He had left her a mystery, a message, and possibly a legacy she could not yet name. And she was ready to uncover the truth he had been guarding for so long. Mira leaned closer to the metal surface and felt a thrill run through her because the safe looked like it had been waiting just for her, and the sunlight falling through the barn window made it shine faintly. She brushed the dust away and noticed a small emblem etched into the top, a simple symbol of a leaf which she immediately recognized from her father's old pendant he wore when he worked in the fields. The emblem made her heart race because it reminded her that her father had always paid attention to small details that others would not notice. She bent down and pressed her hand along the edge of the safe and felt the cold metal beneath her palm. She wondered why he had kept it hidden and what he had wanted to protect for her future. The barn was quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves outside and the distant crow of a bird, but inside, Mira felt a presence that made her certain he was near in some way through the memory of his voice and the touch of his handwriting in the notebook she still held. She wanted to open it immediately, but knew she needed to think carefully because whatever lay inside was something he had kept secret for years and it must have a purpose for her. She sat back on her heels and examined the notebook again and noticed a few pages she had not looked at closely before. There were sketches of the farm, the trees, and the paths her father had walked with her when she was a little girl. She remembered how he had pointed to the trees and said that one day she would take care of them and understand why they were planted in a special order. Her eyes fell on a small section of the notebook that had numbers written alongside short notes. Each number had a memory attached to it. One was for the summer when she and her father mended the broken fence together and he had shown her how to hammer carefully without hurting the wood. Another was for the winter when they stayed by the fireplace counting stars outside the frosted window. And the last was for the spring when she planted her first tree and he had knelt beside her guiding her hands. Mira realized that the numbers were likely the combination for the safe. The thought made her stomach tighten because she felt the connection between the memories and the trust he had placed in her to remember them. He had built this puzzle knowing that she would have to think and feel her way through it. The knowledge that the solution was tied to moments they had shared made it feel like he was still there with her in the barn, teaching her the same lessons about patience and careful attention. She stood up slowly and turned the dial on the safe to the first number, her fingers trembling slightly from excitement and anticipation. The metal clicked softly beneath her touch, and it sounded louder in the quiet of the barn than she expected. She adjusted her position and set the second number, remembering the cold winter air and the warmth of the fire, and the dial moved smoothly. Her thoughts drifted to the spring day when she had planted the tree, and her father had said that life and growth often start with small seeds that need care to flourish. She took a deep breath and carefully turned the dial to the final number and pressed down on the small lever beside it. She held her breath as she waited for a sound, and when a soft click came from the safe, she felt a rush of relief and wonder. Mira gently lifted the lid, and it creaked open to reveal a small wooden box, some envelopes tied with a ribbon, and a folded map that looked very old. She carefully pulled out the wooden box and opened it first because it felt familiar and personal. Inside the wooden box was a silver pendant in the shape of a leaf, exactly like the emblem etched on the top of the safe. Mira held it in her hands and felt a warmth spread through her chest because it reminded her of her father wearing it on long days in the sun while working the land. She remembered how he had said the leaf represented patience, growth, and the care that comes with attention to detail. She fastened the pendant around her neck and noticed that it fit perfectly. It was as if he had left it just for her to carry his memory and his lessons forward. Next, she turned to the envelopes tied with the ribbon and carefully untied them. Each envelope was addressed to her in her father's handwriting, and they were filled with letters that he had written over the years, even before she knew she would find the safe. Mira opened the first envelope and began reading. The words were full of love, advice, and explanations about the choices he had made to protect the farm and their family's heritage. He wrote about hard times when he had saved small parts of the land for her, about the planting of new trees, and about the quiet joys he had experienced in working the farm. Mira felt tears prick her eyes because she realized he had thought of her every step of the way and had been planning for her even when others believed he had left nothing. The map inside the safe was old but very clear, with corners of the farm outlined in detail and small symbols marking certain areas. Mira saw that her father had drawn paths between the trees, places where he had stored supplies, and spots he considered special. There were small notes written along the edges of the map that reminded her of lessons he had given her about patience, observation, and care. One corner of the map had a small X drawn over an area of the land that she had always ignored as ordinary, but now she understood that it was a place her father wanted her to explore. She felt a sense of wonder because the map was not just a guide to physical locations, but a guide to understanding the life and wisdom he had left behind. Mira folded the map carefully and placed it back in the safe, along with the letters and the pendant. She knew that opening the safe had given her more than objects. It had given her insight into the life her father had lived for her, a life full of thought, care, and quiet preparation. Mira sat on the barn floor, her back against the cool wall, and looked around at the space she had once thought was empty. Dust motes floated in the sunlight, and the beams of the barn looked as sturdy and welcoming as they had in her childhood memories. The sound of the wind outside made the barn feel alive, and for the first time she did not feel alone. She understood that her father had left her a legacy in the form of lessons, memories, and a plan for the future of the farm. The safe was a reminder that he believed in her, that he trusted her to carry on what he had built, and that he had confidence in her ability to make choices wisely. Mira felt a sense of pride mixed with determination, and she knew she wanted to explore the areas on the map and understand every detail her father had left for her. The thought filled her with energy and a quiet excitement she had not felt before. She could see herself walking through the fields, tending to the trees, and following the paths he had marked, not because anyone told her to, but because she wanted to honor his guidance and vision. Mira spent the rest of the afternoon in the barn, carefully reading each letter and tracing her fingers over the map. Each detail revealed more about her father's character and the careful thought he had put into the future of the farm. She discovered that he had hidden seeds in special places, small collections of tools and materials he wanted her to find as she grew into her role as the caretaker of the land. The letters explained his reasons for planting certain trees and why he had preserved corners of the land that seemed unremarkable. It was a lesson in patience, foresight. The fields, feeling a sense of purpose and clarity. The whispers of the town no longer mattered, because she understood that the true value her father had left her was not something others could see or measure. It was something she carried inside herself, in her memories, her knowledge, and the connection she had to the land. Mira felt ready to continue what her father had begun, and the barn and the safe had shown her the path. The next morning Mira woke with a feeling of purpose that she had not felt in a long time, and the sunlight streaming through her bedroom window made the room feel warm and full of possibility. She dressed quickly and took the notebook and the map from the safe, because she wanted to plan her first journey through the parts of the farm her father had marked as important. Each step outside felt different because she saw the land not as empty fields but as a place full of stories, lessons, and careful planning. The wind carried the scent of grass and earth, and the trees swayed gently as if they recognized her presence and welcomed her to take her father's place as their caretaker. She held the silver pendant around her neck and felt its weight as a reminder of the love and thought he had left for her, and it gave her courage to step forward with confidence. She walked toward the barn first because she wanted to feel the space again where she had discovered the safe, and it felt like a place that held the beginning of her new journey. The floorboards were worn beneath her feet, and sunlight filtered through cracks in the wood and illuminated the dust in patterns that seemed alive and almost magical. Mira knelt and touched the planks, remembering how her father had hidden the safe for her, and she realized that his intentions were more than a simple gift. It was a guide to understanding him, the land, and the life he had built for her. She smiled because she felt connected to him in a way that words could not describe. With the notebook and the map in hand, Mira left the barn and followed the paths her father had drawn on the map. The first area was a small grove near the edge of the property where he had planted young trees years ago. The trees were growing tall now, and their leaves created patterns of shadow on the ground. She knelt beside the smallest of the trees and touched its bark, and remembered the spring day he had planted it with her guiding her hands. She remembered the lessons he had taught about patience, growth, and nurturing the things that were important to her. As she looked around the grove, she noticed small bundles tied to the lower branches of a few trees and opened them carefully. Inside were seeds of other plants and instructions on where to plant them and how to care for them. Myra's heart lifted because she realized he had planned this for her to continue and to make the land even more beautiful. It was not just work, it was a way for her to feel the same joy he had felt in tending the farm. She gathered the seeds and followed the directions in the notebook, imagining how the new plants would grow and thrive in the coming seasons. Each moment made her feel closer to her father and gave her a sense of pride in the responsibility she now carried. After finishing in the grove, Mira walked along a narrow path that led to a small pond at the center of the farm. The water was clear and reflected the sky like glass, and the sound of frogs croaking softly made the place feel alive. Her father had marked the pond on the map as a place to rest and observe the land, and she understood why he had loved it. She sat on a large rock by the edge and opened another envelope from the safe. The letter spoke of the importance of reflection, of taking time to observe the growth around her, and of making decisions thoughtfully. Mira read the words slowly and felt as though he were sitting beside her whispering advice and encouragement. She traced the illustrations in the letter that showed how to maintain the pond, plant flowers along the banks, and feed the fish. Every detail felt personal and full of care, and Mira realized that her father had left not just objects but a complete guide to understanding and caring for the land. She put the letter away and watched the water, thinking about how she would follow his guidance and make the pond a place of beauty and calm. It was the first step in learning to see the farm as he had seen it, and to carry forward the legacy he had entrusted to her. Myra's next stop was the old orchard at the far end of the property where apple trees had been planted in neat rows. Some trees were young and some were old and sturdy. She walked carefully along the paths and noticed the way her father had pruned the branches to allow sunlight to reach every corner. She remembered helping him pick apples as a child and feeling the joy of harvesting fruit from trees they had planted together. Following the notes in the notebook, she inspected each tree and discovered small markings that indicated which trees needed special care, where the soil needed enrichment, and where new saplings should be planted. She worked patiently, moving soil, arranging supports for the branches, and planting new trees in the marked spots. Her hands became tired, but her heart felt light and happy because every action connected her to her father and to the lessons he had left for her. She imagined him watching her from somewhere near and smiling quietly at her careful work. The orchard became a place of memories and hope, and Mira knew that each tree she tended was part of the future her father had dreamed of for her. By mid-afternoon, Mira reached the corner of the land marked with a small X on the map. It was an area she had often ignored because it looked ordinary and unremarkable, but as she approached she noticed small stones forming a shape around a young tree. She bent down to look and found a tiny tin box buried beneath the soil. Inside were more seeds, a small note, and a drawing of a hidden path through the fields. Mira realized that her father had left her a treasure hunt of sorts, a way to explore the land while learning about patience, observation, and careful planning. She carefully followed the map and the notes, discovering other small surprises hidden under the soil, behind stones, and beneath fallen branches. Each discovery brought a smile to her face and a sense of excitement because it felt like she was walking through her father's mind and heart as well as the farm itself. She understood now that he had planned for her not just to inherit the land, but to experience it in a way that taught her about life, growth, and responsibility. Each hidden clue strengthened her determination to care for the land and carry forward the traditions he had left behind. As the day drew toward evening, Mira sat on the porch of the farmhouse and looked out across the fields, the barn, the orchard, and the pond glowing in the soft light of the sun. The birds sang their evening songs and the wind carried the smell of grass and soil and flowers. She thought about all she had discovered, the safe, the letters, the map, the seeds, and the hidden notes, and realized that her father had left her more than anyone in town could understand. He had left her a life filled with meaning, a connection to the land, and the guidance to carry forward a legacy. Mira felt a quiet sense of pride because she knew she would honor his wishes and work patiently to maintain and improve the farm. She knew she would face challenges, that the work would be hard, and that there would be moments of doubt, but she also knew that the love, guidance, and wisdom her father had left for her would always be with her. She held the silver pendant in her hand and felt its weight as a reminder of his care and the lessons he had shared. The journey through the farm was just beginning, and she felt ready to explore every corner and understand every detail. As the sky turned shades of pink and orange and the first stars began to appear, Mira felt a deep connection to the land and to her father. She understood that the farm was more than property, that it was a living story, and she was part of that story. Each tree, each plant, each path, and each hidden note was a thread in the fabric of her life, and her father's careful planning had woven it with thought and love. Mira felt a strong sense of purpose because she now knew that she was not alone, that she had guidance, and that she had the tools to shape the future of the farm with care, patience, and thoughtfulness. She stood up and took one last look at the X on the map and the grove and the orchard and the pond, and realized that each step she had taken had brought her closer to understanding the life her father had lived for her. The safe had been the first door to open, but the journey through the land and the lessons hidden in each corner of the farm were the true treasure, and she felt ready to follow them wherever they led. Mira woke early with the sunlight spilling across her room and a soft breeze moving through the open window, and she felt a quiet excitement as she thought about the discoveries waiting for her in the far corners of the farm. She carried the notebook, the map, and the letters from the safe because each item felt like a key to understanding the life her father had built and the lessons he had wanted her to learn. The barn was her first stop because it had been the place where everything began, and stepping inside it now felt like entering a story that her father had written just for her. The dust floated in the air and the wooden beams cast long shadows across the floor, and Mira felt a gentle calm as she walked across the space. She knelt for a moment to touch the floorboards where she had first discovered the safe, and remembered the excitement and curiosity that had filled her then. It reminded her that her father had trusted her to find the truth on her own and to use patience, observation, and care to uncover what he had hidden. She smiled and straightened up, feeling ready to continue the journey he had left for her. Following the map, she moved toward the northern fields where a cluster of small trees grew in irregular patterns. Her father had marked this section as important because it held a secret about how he had managed to preserve the best soil and the healthiest plants. Mira bent down and began to examine the ground carefully, and noticed faint markings in the dirt and small stones arranged in subtle lines. She realized that these were part of the instructions he had left to show her how to recognize the natural patterns of the land and understand where new seeds would grow best. She uncovered tiny envelopes buried near the roots of some trees, and each one contained seeds for different types of plants along with a short note about how to nurture them. As she planted the seeds, she thought about how her father had considered the growth of every leaf and branch, and had used his knowledge and care to create a balance that she would now maintain. Mira felt a sense of accomplishment as she placed each seed in the soil and covered it gently, imagining the plants growing strong and healthy over the coming years. She walked along a narrow path toward the old orchard and noticed the way sunlight danced across the leaves of the apple trees and the shadows formed intricate patterns on the ground. The orchard had always been a special place for her, and her father had included instructions in the letters about pruning the trees and checking the soil for richness and moisture. Mira followed the guidance closely, trimming branches with care, supporting weaker limbs with small stakes, and removing debris that could block the growth of new shoots. She felt connected to her father with each action because it was as if he were guiding her hands and teaching her to care for the orchard as he had. The physical work was satisfying, but the emotional connection was even stronger because every tree, every branch, every leaf seemed to carry a memory of their time together. She paused occasionally to read a passage from the letters where he had shared stories of their work, and of the lessons he had learned from the land, and felt a sense of pride in being entrusted with such a thoughtful legacy. After finishing in the orchard, Mira moved toward a secluded area marked with a small symbol she had not explored before. The land was slightly uneven and overgrown with grass and small shrubs, and she could see faint outlines of paths that had been used long ago. She followed the directions in the notebook and carefully lifted some loose stones and soil. Beneath them she discovered a small wooden crate and opened it to find a collection of notebooks her father had kept over the years. Each notebook contained detailed observations about the farm, the plants, the weather, and his plans for each season. Mira realized that her father had not just left instructions for her, he had left his knowledge, his experience, and his wisdom in a way that she could study and learn from. She spent hours reading through the pages, noting the patterns he had recorded, and imagining how he had walked the land each day, observing the growth and changes. The notebooks revealed a depth of care and intelligence that Mira had never fully understood before, and made her feel connected to him in a new and profound way. As the day grew warmer, Mira moved toward the pond, and noticed the water reflecting the sky in calm ripples, and the birds moving gracefully along the edges. She had spent time here the previous day reading a letter, and now she understood more about why her father had marked this spot as special. He had included instructions on maintaining the water quality, planting flowers along the banks, and observing the natural life around it. Mira knelt and followed his guidance, adding small stones to the edges, arranging the plants, and observing the movements of fish and frogs. She realized that her father had not only wanted her to care for the land, but also to connect with it and to appreciate the life that surrounded her. Each task became a meditation, a way to feel the harmony he had worked to create. She felt a calmness she had not known before, and a joy in knowing that she was continuing his work with thought and care. By afternoon, Mira reached the section of the farm where the X had been marked on the map, and she felt a sense of anticipation because she had discovered small hidden treasures here before. The area was slightly wooded with a mixture of young trees and shrubs, and she carefully examined the ground and noticed small wooden boxes hidden among the roots and under stones. Careful attention, and the importance of thinking through actions. She understood that her father had designed these hidden treasures to teach her the value of discovery, observation, and thoughtful work, and she felt a deep sense of responsibility to honor his guidance and wisdom. She carefully placed the seeds in small containers to plant later and organized the tools according to his instructions, and she realized that each action was a step toward understanding the full extent of the gift he had left. Mira felt a sense of satisfaction because the farm was no longer just a collection of land and trees. It had become a living story, a guide to understanding her father's life, and a path for her to follow and learn from. Each box contained letters, small tools, and reminders for her to continue her work thoughtfully. She read the letters and felt a deep emotional connection because her father had written about the importance of patience, observation, and consistency. Each note reminded her that success did not come from rushing but from careful attention to every detail. Mira placed the tools and seeds in her bag to use later and realized that each discovery was helping her understand the full scope of her father's plans and the care he had taken to ensure that she could carry on the farm successfully. As the day moved toward evening, Mira paused on a small hill overlooking the fields, the orchard, the pond, and the barn. She saw how the sunlight painted the landscape in warm shades and the shadows stretched long across the grass. The letters, notebooks, and map she had found gave her a sense of clarity about her father's intentions and his love for the land and for her. She realized that the safe had been the first step, a way to spark her curiosity and show her that he had thought of her every step of the way. Now she understood that the true treasures were the lessons, the memories, and the guidance he had provided. Mira felt a sense of responsibility but also a strong determination because she knew that the work she was doing was meaningful and that it was a way to honor her father's legacy. She held the silver pendant in her hand and felt a wave of gratitude and love because it represented the connection she now felt with him and the land he had nurtured. Mira spent the evening planning her next steps because she wanted to continue exploring the farm and understanding every detail. She noted where each set of seeds should be planted, which paths to clear, and which areas of the land needed special attention. She felt a sense of purpose unlike anything she had known before, and a feeling that her father's wisdom would guide her through every decision. The farm was no longer just a collection of fields and trees. It was a living story of her father's life, his care, and his hope for her future. Mira knew that she was part of that story now, and that each action she took would shape the land and continue the legacy he had worked so hard to create. She felt ready to face the challenges and to embrace the lessons hidden in each corner of the farm. The sun set behind the trees and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, and Mira felt that the land was alive with possibilities, and that the journey she had begun was only the start of a path that would bring her closer to understanding her father and the life he had built for her. Mira woke with a sense of calm purpose as the first light of morning filled her room, and she felt the warmth of the sun on her face and the promise of a new day ahead, and she carried the notebook, map, and letters with her because each item was part of the story her father had left behind for her, and it gave her courage and direction. She stepped outside and breathed in the fresh air of the farm, and every sound and movement felt alive and welcoming. Birds chirped among the trees, and the wind rustled the leaves as if the land itself recognized her presence and encouraged her to take the next step in the journey he had designed. Mira moved toward the barn first because it was the place where everything had started, and the memory of discovering the safe still brought a sense of wonder and excitement that made her feel closer to her father even though he was no longer there. She knelt on the floor and touched the planks as she remembered the first time she had uncovered the safe, and she felt a deep connection to the love, wisdom, and thoughtfulness he had placed in that hidden space. The barn was quiet and peaceful, and Mira understood that it had been more than a storage place. It had been a starting point, a place where he had invited her to begin learning, exploring, and understanding the life he had built for her and the land he had cherished. She followed the map to the northern fields where the trees her father had planted were beginning to show the signs of the care he had given them, and she smiled as she walked among them, and noticed the small bundles of seeds tucked carefully beneath the roots or hidden among the stones. Mira knelt beside the first bundle and opened it gently, and followed the instructions her father had written to plant and nurture the seeds, and as she worked she thought about the lessons of patience, observation, and care that he had taught her. Every movement felt deliberate and meaningful, and she realized that he had planned for her not just to maintain the farm but to understand it, to see its patterns, and to feel connected to the growth and change happening all around her. She worked through the morning, planting seeds, arranging supports for young trees, and clearing paths that would allow sunlight to reach the plants and the ground to remain fertile. Each action reminded her of the time she had spent with him as a child, learning about the land, and she felt a strong sense of gratitude for the thoughtfulness he had put into every detail. After finishing in the northern fields, Mira moved toward the orchard where the apple trees stretched in rows and sunlight filtered through the leaves to create patterns of light and shadow on the ground, and she felt a quiet joy as she walked among them. She checked the soil and the branches and followed the guidance in the letters to prune the trees carefully and remove anything that might block their growth, and she realized that her father had not only cared for the trees but had also cared about teaching her how to care for them and understand their needs. The orchard became a place of reflection for her because she could see the growth over the years and the results of careful planning and patient attention, and she understood that the lessons he had left were as important as the physical objects in the safe. Mira worked slowly, deliberately, and thoughtfully because each tree, each branch, each leaf was part of a larger picture her father had created, and she was honored to be part of it and to continue his work. By mid-afternoon, Mira moved to the pond where the water reflected the sky in calm ripples and the trees were mirrored perfectly on the surface, and she remembered the letter her father had written about observing the life around her and taking time to understand the patterns of growth, change, and balance. She followed his instructions to arrange stones along the banks, plant flowers, and check the water for clarity, and she realized that the pond was more than just a source of water or a place of beauty. It was a living lesson, a demonstration of how care, patience, and attention could create harmony and balance. Mira knelt beside the water and traced her fingers along the edge, watching the small fish swim and the insects skim across the surface, and she felt connected to the natural life her father had observed and nurtured for years. The pond became a symbol for her, a reminder that his gift was not only the land, but also the understanding of how to live in balance with it and the wisdom to see beauty and meaning in the simplest things. After finishing at the pond, Mira followed the map to the secluded corner marked with the X, and she discovered hidden boxes beneath stones and small wooden crates tucked under branches, and in each one she found letters, small tools, and seeds, and she read the letters carefully and realized that each message was filled with reminders about patience. As evening approached, Mira climbed a small hill overlooking the fields, orchard, pond, and barn, and she felt a sense of awe and accomplishment as she took in the beauty of the land bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. She held the silver pendant in her hand, and felt the weight of it against her chest, and she thought about the letters, the safe, the map, the seeds, and the instructions, and realized that the true gift her father had left was not the objects but the understanding, the wisdom, and the connection he had shared with her. She understood now that the farm was a living legacy, a story of love, care, and foresight, and she was part of that story and responsible for continuing it. Mira felt a quiet strength and determination because she knew that every action she took would honor her father and the life he had built for her, and she knew that she was capable of making thoughtful choices, caring for the land, and continuing the lessons he had taught. Mira spent the remaining hours of the day planning the work she would do over the coming weeks, organizing the seeds, checking the notebooks, and making notes about the areas she wanted to improve and care for. She felt a sense of purpose unlike anything she had felt before because she realized that her father's gift had not been about money or possessions but about life, connection, and understanding. She imagined herself walking through the fields, tending the orchard, watching the pond, and discovering hidden notes and treasures he had left, and she felt a deep sense of joy and anticipation because each day would bring a new lesson and a new opportunity to connect with him and the land. She understood that the safe had been the beginning, but the true journey was ongoing and full of discovery, learning, and growth, and she felt ready to embrace it fully. As night fell, Mira sat on the porch and looked out over the farm bathed in the gentle light of the moon and stars, and she felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. She realized that her father had left her more than anyone had believed, that the land, the trees, the pond, the orchard, the letters, the map, the seeds, and the hidden treasures were all part of a larger gift that could not be measured by money or material things. It was a gift of understanding, love, guidance, and connection that would continue to grow with her care and attention. Mira held the pendant close to her heart and felt the presence of her father in every sound, every movement, and every living thing around her. She understood that she was not alone, that she carried his wisdom and love with her, and that the legacy he had left would guide her throughout her life and the life of the farm for years to come. The whispers of the town no longer mattered because she had discovered the truth, the real treasure her father had left, and she felt a quiet joy in knowing that she could carry it forward with thought, care, and love, and that the farm, the land, and the lessons would live on through her.